This summer, wear the scent of a real lover. Deep Cologne by Riptide. Fresh in buds now.
Fresh and
All right, folks, welcome back to yet another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all my buds, and we are joined once again by our bud, Roger Bodee. How you doing, Roger? Welcome back to the show.
Good. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be a Roger Bodee again for the second time now.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so perfect. We had to, just have you back. And we'll have to have you back again. Well, if
One
you
day.
want to.
Another 2 years?
Another 2, yeah. It's crazy. The
Biannually.
The cycle sometimes, comes around a little bit slower than others, but I'm happy to have you back, buddy. But we got a great show for you all. We were kind of gifted with like we were going to talk about a decent amount of stuff anyway, but we were gifted with I don't know if it was a leak or it was a actual spoiler, but we got to see some new heroes that are coming in high seas. So we will just chat about them a little bit. We'll get to know what Roger's been up to these past 2 years, and maybe even talk a little bit about Pro Tour London. I keep wanting to say LA. I don't know why. I mean, it's 2 L's.
That was a year ago now, almost exactly to the day.
Yeah, and that was quite the spicy one. So I'm excited to see what London has for us as well. But let's get down to brass tacks here. Roger, it's been a minute. 2 years of minutes, actually, since you've joined us for the first time. But since then, you've actually started making your own content, right? On your own. Mm-hmm. You are making Roger That. Can you please pitch Roger That to us right now? And also, what kind of led to your decision to, stake it out alone?
I make Roger That now, solo content, different from the traditional style of podcast I was doing with Michael Hamilton on the Minarcast. And instead of focusing solely on, meta or tier lists or the very nitty gritty of competitive things, I kind of just talk about whatever the hell I feel like talking about on a week to week basis. I try to make it fun and entertaining. I try to riff off some Roger Bodee hot takes classic, but I'm trying to be more careful, more hot takes, but not Inferno. Oh my God, I've lit everything on fire takes anymore. I'm trying to scale it back. There's a level, so I'm trying to learn how to.
Yeah. I mean, if I know you, I don't think you can help yourself at some points. I know you want to throw those scalding hot takes out there. So we'll have to see if you have any for this show, which will, you can let them fly here.
Sure, yeah. I just love being a contrarian. I think is ultimately the heart of it. I just like, if everybody's saying like, that's X, I'm like, no, that's not X. That's clearly Y. You guys are idiots. So.
Yeah, I think even last week, or maybe it was when I was on Pitch Perfect with Kiki and Elaine, but we were talking about, if we got out in front of like every Flesh and Blood player and I was to do a podcast with everybody, I don't think we could actually get everybody to answer the same way at the same time, because I'd be like, do we like 0 for 4s with Go Again to block 3?
Oh yeah.
And someone would say no.
Yeah.
So hey, listen, contrarians are fun. We need them to kind of keep us centered in a way. But how is Roger That going? You having fun doing it?
Yeah, so when I recorded the first one, it was really weird making content without Michael. And I actually did it not even planning to add like little side jokes or whatever. And I don't know if that'll be like a recurring thing for every episode anymore. This past week I didn't do it because I got some feedback that like people would actually just listen to it, or it kind of undermines my message sometimes. So we'll see. But after I recorded it, I thought back to my teenage years when I would watch the Colbert Report on Comedy Central, and he would do his nightly word, and I was like, oh yeah, I could just troll myself after I've recorded this. Now I could just like all that sarcasm and silliness that I could normally direct at Michael, I'll just redirect it at myself after I've recorded it. And so I put all the silly jokes up there, and I kind of like doing that. It's very intensive, kind of like trying to make them funny, obviously relevant, topical, but Yeah, so that's some of the content. Some of the content does still focus around like flesh and blood, very sweaty things. I did a warrior breakdown. I was pretty happy with just kind of addressing the issues that I have of the warrior class. And then, funnily enough, the very next week I was able to talk to Brian Gottlieb about it. So I definitely want to do some interviews here and there. So just kind of a little bit of everything. Whatever I feel like doing, I want the freedom to kind of explore it or talk about it.
No, it's awesome, and you know, I always really appreciate a little bit of humor in stuff, especially if it's going to be, you know, sweaty as you put it. You know, if I'm going to watch something that's kind of really in the weeds a little bit, I don't want a boring lecture. You know, I want a little joke here and there. So it's very much appreciated. And you know, speaking of warriors, you know, I know you did a breakdown, but we're starting to see Fang actually, you know, not
Yeah.
like place, but like do relatively well. What's your take on Fang as a hero, as a warrior fan yourself?
So he is really interesting in that basically he has power spikes that the other warriors have, but his power spikes then kind of last until the fealties go away. Like your opponent disrupts you enough that you actually lose your fealties or you stumble somehow. So it's nice that he has a more sustained power level once he gets those three fealties in play. It's just getting there consistently is kind of his issue. And the builds I were trying for a long time were basically the very, very mono red line for Dromai, kind of like reminiscent with just a bunch of 0 for 4s when you're not turned on. And then once you are turned on, you get to add the extra supplemental value with it. But that didn't really hammer out a lot of the consistency issues. And unfortunately, there is an ice hero again in the meta. So that proves to be tricky when you go with the all red line route. So it's just one of those things where the power level is just too inconsistent, but I'm happy that it's at least a higher power level than we've seen Warriors be in the past.
Yeah, yeah, and like there are some inherent problems there, right, with the warrior class, which you've stated before, and it is such a puzzle to figure out, like how can they overcome it with its inherent identity and such. And it feels like Fang's probably a nice turn in the right direction, from what I can tell, and he's a lot of fun. Although, you know, as a Riptide player, I could love people are playing Fang on my game.
Yeah, yeah.
Or any warrior, to be honest. But it is very cool. Now, you know, you definitely come from the competitive side of things, right? You know, with your time with Michael, and now, you know, even making more competitive content with Roger, that mixing in some other stuff, of course. What would you say your relation is to the competitive scene as it stands now, with the eve of Pro Tour London coming upon us?
Yeah, so I'm qualified for London. I managed to take down a draft PQ for Rosetta, so excited to head out in London and throw down, even if the meta is looking a little shaky potentially. But I don't know if we want to talk about that at all. But uh, I just really value competing in general for my hobby and my whole life. Basically, I've realized that I like measuring my current skill set or where I'm at against other people's skill sets because it gives you a very easy and valid way to see how good you are at something.
Mm-hmm.
Where I played guitar for a long time growing up, and I kind of fell out of it because I couldn't channel it into something competitive, really. That's more of like an artistic expression kind of thing. But as far as like, you know, video games or board games, or, you know, I was playing fighting games like Street Fighter for a while, and then I got into Magic the Gathering for a long time and got really heavy in that competitive scene before Flesh and Blood. So I just really like being able to see how you measure up against somebody else. I think that's really valuable, and it gives you like those micro goals where you can be like, okay, I'm gonna win my armory. Okay, cool, I won my armory. Okay, now I just want to like day two a calling. Okay, cool, I day two the calling. Okay, now I want to qualify for a pro tour, and it's just like it keeps giving you those like progression scales that I think are really satisfying to achieve.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's funny that you mentioned like the guitar thing and the artistic expression, which kind of like, it's funny, it all comes around because via making content, that is an artistic expression mixed in with, you know, your competitive ideas with Flesh and Blood, which is kind of cool. Now, You did mention the shaky meta. I think it's worth talking about because a lot of people are talking about it, right? London's around the corner unless Zen happens to win one of the few battle hardens that are coming up. The meta should theoretically stay the same, at least hero wise, right? And the talk of the town, or the talk of like Twitch chat or YouTube chat, is certainly Aurora is a plague on our existence, and it's too good and unbeatable, or yada yada yada, or even Florian just happens to win. So maybe just Runeblade's the problem. Viserai just left. We don't know. What's your take? What's going on here? Like, how do you view this meta? Is this a good one, or is it is it just too tough to navigate right now unless you just want to expect Aurora?
I think it's very similar to where we were maybe 9 months ago when Zen was the best deck, pre-bans basically, where the format's just going to revolve around Aurora, where you're either playing a deck that is Aurora or a deck that beats Aurora, or you're just not really doing anything that's viable. And, there's other decks that can kind of pop out when formats like that exist. During that, Zen was the best deck format. We saw Shoma win with Uzuri. So there's really cool things that can pop out of those metas. But from like a broad player space perspective, I imagine like at your local Armory level, or, even pro quests that are going to be coming up, it can feel really, really bad when you want to play like Dorinthia or Riptide even, and you just kind of just don't have a shot at ever hoping to win the game when you sit down from an Aurora at times, where just like her aggro plan is like 10 out of 10, her damage is super consistent, and having like access to like some combo things as well just kind of gives her like a super dynamic game plan that just can deal ridiculous amounts of damage.
Well, I will say that my Riptide deck has quite the win rate against Aurora. Thank you very much.
I'm sure.
It is control Riptide, so I'm just doing the Guardian thing. But it is, I mean, maybe that's just where you got to be. You mentioned an Ice Hero that exists right now, which I guess is a good time to bring up Yaro. I almost said Oldham again. Jeez. No, not again. What are your thoughts on Yaro kind of entering a meta where he actually seems not the worst?
Yeah, so I've gone really deep on Yarl the past month or so. So there's kind of a handful of heroes I kind of like locked in leading up to Pro Tour. Yarl was one of them. I kind of built him. Most recent builds were just going way back to like heavy ice builds with Aurora being prevalent, because the Earth builds are nice in a long, grindy game. Obviously, Felling of the Crown, 10 out of 10 card when you can like start decomposing and getting there. But when the turns are really compressed and you need to be disrupting or having relevant answers to an aggro deck every turn, Ice kind of fills that role a little bit better. And things like Hypothermia can be really annoying for Aurora to deal with. And having cards like Visage to like tutor those up in order to like get them onto the battlefield, or being able to even tutor up Channel like Frigid, just like really nice. So I like that kind of toolbox aspect of the deck. So I've been going really deep on Yara. I don't know that I have a build that I'm like super satisfied with, because obviously when you are playing Yarrow, the thing that when you just sit down at a match, you just have to know you're never, ever beating an Enigma. It's just never going to happen. You can't, there's no configuration of 80 cards that I think of that can beat an Enigma. It just can't happen. It's just, there's nothing you can do about it. And new can be particularly challenging because it's either fill your deck with unplayable, horrible blues, or play good blues and then lose to new. So it's kind of like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, this is kind of the thorn in the side a little bit of these kind of metas like this one, where, you know, you have this clear aggro deck that is the best deck in the format, right? And warps the format in a way, as you said. And you have these heroes like New and Enigma there to kind of be disruptive or whatever they may be, that they kind of gatekeep against the decks that might just really perform against Aurora, which is tough. Now, you know, let's say you knew that London was going to be 100% Auroras. What are you bringing? Are you bringing Jarl?
I knew it was going to be 100% Auroras. Yeah, I think I'd feel comfortable bringing some configuration of a Jarl list, probably heavier on the ice side, like I said. I don't know. People said that Prism was a really bad matchup for Aurora a long time. And I think post Armory deck that has changed. So I think the Prisms are kind of going back into the mines to see if there's any new tech that they could bring up to swing that matchup back in their favor. So that could be an interesting choice for like a counter pick. And then I haven't put in the rips on like Uzuri, but maybe Shoma's got a new build that can show us how that dominates, I guess, quite literally Aurora. So we'll see.
Yeah, it should be interesting. You know, you mentioned some kind of situations like Shoma. You know, bringing Uzuri, winning that meta, or winning that Pro Tour in that wild meta. Do you think there's a chance for any kind of huge surprises in London akin to that?
Potentially, it'd be weird. I like maybe like Acilio, like just a weird wizard popping out like him out of nowhere, because he's just a deck that like I could see him having if you can just build him like super explosive where you know the game's only gonna last like 4 or 5 turns, but Aurora just stumbles a second or doesn't like have a functional game plan, and you're just able to like capitalize on that and just kind of get a Celia deck out of nowhere. Maybe he can pop out. Like that'd be maybe like a dark horse pick I could think of, but I've definitely not put in the work for that. I am not smart enough to build a wizard deck by any means. So,
well, okay, let's go to the other end of the spectrum. You know, you talk about being smart. Let's talk about, no, this is just a dig.
Brute.
Yeah, dig at Brute. We just saw some insane Brute gameplay at the Calling this past weekend in Covey, I believe it was. And, you know, obviously there's that like OTK crazy Blood Rush Bella turn, but that Rhinar did get 9th in that Calling. You know, that might be, although it was being played by a specialist, Eugene. So like, is that enough of a reason to say, hey, like obviously the damage output for Rhinar can be, or Brute in general can be pretty insane. Is it worth trying to race, you know, with the bone, like being the bonehead against Aurora?
Against Aurora, probably not, but Rhinor's probably a good level 3 deck where you think of like level 1 is going to be Aurora and level 2 is going to be the decks that beat Aurora, like things like Yaro or maybe like slower, more controlly decks that want to block a lot. And then Rhinor is like the level 3 deck where like you're beating all the decks that want to block a lot by saying, "Rar, I intimidate you, no blocking." So I can like, it just depends on like what level do you want to be at. But I will say traditionally going to level, as somebody who's been at level 3 a lot in Flesh and Blood's history, it's not really a place to be. People just usually stick to level 1.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now, what level is Bolton at then? Because, well, we know that you have a relationship with Bolton.
Somewhere down at the like bottom of the floor level. Just don't bother.
Will it ever happen for Bolton?
You know, Dust Till Dawn 3 comes out eventually.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Well, it looks like we're not getting Brute in the high seas, so you know they might be just saving more Brute play for Dust Till Dawn 3. Monarch Part 3. So, you know,
I'd be surprised if Brute isn't the set after this now, because wouldn't that be the class that has the longest time between sets now? Because I know Ranger and Mechanologist were coming up, and so now I think Brute is after.
That's true. What, you know, Illusionist, definitely we've had.
Yeah, a lot
of Ninja, a lot of Assassin, and we had Runeblade and Wizard. Are we missing anybody?
Warriors we've had a good amount.
Yeah, Warrior.
Guardians we've had, I guess Guardians, but we have the Guardian Master Pack coming out in the fall as well.
So yeah, it should be interesting. Yeah, Savage Land set would be pretty sick. So we'll see. We will see. Now, I do have to ask you some questions about The Hunted and your fresh faves from The Hunted. Well, first of all, how'd you like the set?
I think it was really interesting in that it felt like it was like played safe a little bit, but then just through like the thematic elements of the set with the hunted, you know, with Arachne and the storyline, I think that really delivered really well in the gameplay experience. And I think despite that, while the power level might not be as high as like obviously as something as MST, which is you can't have everything always be that high.
Yeah, no.
And at least led to a lot of really interesting deck building decisions and interesting heroes. And, you know, I think over time people have figured out like Syndra's tricks, but like she was like a phenomenal week 1 deck. I remember like I even was punting into Syndra for a long time because be like, oh yeah, that chain link technically hit because of the dagger flick. So I guess now you're drawing off mask momentum, and I lose the game.
Yeah.
So like when like her tricks were like right out of the gate, like they were like really, really good and interesting. And as far as the Arachnes are concerned, I personally dislike the marking mechanic as a centralized game plan where you require your opponent to be marked in order for your cards to have text functionally, because otherwise you just have a bunch of 0 for 3s that have no text, which is not usually a winning game plan. So if your opponents are running things like Shelter for the Storm or Prevention Effects, or just really timing like their marked status as well, I think Mario really struggles in those kinds of matchups. So we'll see if that mechanic ever kind of like becomes a more worthwhile hoop to jump through, but I don't think it's quite there at the moment.
Yeah, definitely a really fun mini game in the limited sphere, but yeah, it in the actual kind of practice in constructed, it has felt a little weird. You know, this is coming from someone who plays like Riptide, and I'm like, whatever, you're playing Assassin, I'm ready for you. But some other heroes might have a different relationship with that kind of matchup. Now, you're gonna have to draft the Hunted in London.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that limited experience?
So I did a draft ProQuest for the last season. I finished in the top 8, and I've been doing lots of Runaways drafts at the same time. I've been having mixed success. I think the thing I've been struggling with the most is I really dislike how swingy Fang is in draft at the moment, where like some games, once again, like in Constructed, where you just hit the 3 fealty and you just run away with the game and snowball, or you just kind of like do all your things and your opponent's just helpless to interact with your reactions or your huge dagger swings every turn. And sometimes your deck's unplayable, and like those swings can be really frustrating to deal with. And then basically the other 2 heroes kind of have to account for those kinds of high level swings and variants. I think of the 3 heroes, I definitely prefer Arachne the most, just because, you know, he has lots of defense reactions. He has the access to the most defense reactions out of the heroes, and just having that kind of more dynamic game plan that can like be defensive or aggressive depending on what the situation calls for. It's just usually a little bit more my tempo, I guess. So we'll see.
That makes sense. It's fun, but you know, yeah, I can understand the swings. Although, you know, golly, when you get the 3 fealty in limited, it does feel like you're unstoppable. You're like, oh well, let me just block however I want real quick and win. But
keep these 2 insane attack reactions, and if I block your damage, you can't block mine. It's a very snowbally game for me. For sure.
Yeah. So I'll be interested to see how that kind of gameplay goes for the participants of the Pro Tour. But let's get to the fresh faves from the Hunted. First, who's your favorite hero from the Hunted?
I am going to go with Arachne Slipped Through the Cracks, the secret hero of the set, because I genuinely love the precedent it sets with these kind of supplemental slot heroes existing or coming into a format. You know, we've seen things like Ira or the Armory deck heroes popping up as like extra ways to slip heroes into the format, but having Arachne Slip Through the Cracks kind of come in and really just add this different dimension to assassins, like a really truly aggressive assassin deck was like really interesting, because I really liked the Arachne Solitary Confinement from Outsiders. That was always like a really fun deck to play, I thought. And so bringing that to Class Constructed was really interesting, and it was definitely a hero I put in a lot of time in at first. Like I went deep on Slippy like when he first came out, but yeah.
Well, how do you feel about Slippy now?
It's interesting because I think you do have major issues with the assassin mirrors, obviously, where they get the benefit of your hero ability and their hero ability, where you just have the hero ability. So that kind of sets you behind there. And it's one of those things where assassins do have some incredibly powerful disruptive tools, but they're also not consistently powerfully disruptive. I kind of talked about like the mark mechanic, right? Where sometimes if you're playing that element of the game plan, your opponent's not marked, you're just not actually disrupting them. Sometimes you have, you know, leave no witnesses and they don't have an arsenal. Like there's just times where your disruption isn't actually as disruptive as you want it to be. And in a format that's as polarized around a very centralized, hyper aggressive deck or very controlling long, grindy decks, he just kind of falls on this awkward middle ground, I found. But, maybe somebody smarter than me figured it out.
I mean, you're making sense there because, I think the universal effect alone was enough to kind of be like, because all these other assassins like playing these stealth cards and people like playing these other assassins. So it is something to consider every single time when you pick up Slippy. So very interesting. Great answer, though. What was your favorite weapon from the Hunted?
Oh, what are Fang's weapons called?
Obsidian Fire Vein.
Obsidian Fire Veins. 100%. Thank you for finally giving warriors a good weapon. I think they're by far the best warrior weapons we've seen. Like I think Brian on a recent interview said Dawnblade's still the best weapon. Obsidian Fire Vein is a phenomenal weapon just because getting that natural go again and an actual pump for rewarding your core game plan, that weapon in and of itself is very good. The issue obviously also comes from when you don't have those draconic reactions or the fact that all your draconic reactions block 2 or are instants that don't block. So that's kind of that's not the issue with the weapon though. That's the card's fault.
Yeah. And it can be fixed. It can be fixed, and it is the coolest looking weapon I think from the set by far. Now, what was your favorite equipment?
The one that transforms into all the arachnes. That card was cool.
Mask of something. I forget.
Mask of transforming into arachnes.
Yeah, that was very cool. Neat little trick for, I guess technically any Arachne can play it too.
Yeah, that's what I think is like really interesting about it is the fact that Arachne Huntsman or Slippy can play those, or can play that headpiece and transform into a chaos agent for a little bit. Like that's really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, what's your favorite card you throw into your deck? Card that they printed, instant defense reaction, attack reaction from the Hunted.
Well, I don't know if it's my favorite, but a lot of my deck lists do start with 3 Shelter of the Storms now. I mean,
yeah.
It's like 3 sinks, 3 shelters, and we'll decide which one of these, what ratio we want of these later. But like when you just start auto-filling your deck list with like the core staples of the game, that is definitely one of them now.
Yeah, it certainly is good, isn't it? It is. It is quite good. I actually cut sinks for the shelters in one of my decks, and I'm like, I never thought I would do that. I never thought they would ever give me that option, but they did. So, now, last time you were here, I didn't ask you this question. Although next time you come, I will ask it again because things change. If you were to be in the world of Wraith, live there, what class and talent would you be?
Probably an adjudicator, right? That's the law-based class the judges get to play as. Yeah. I'd probably go to Solana and be an adjudicator. I'd try to do that. That sounds like up my alley. Yeah.
That makes sense. It makes sense. Not fun at parties, but listen, we need you there.
Dude, somebody's got to keep the format and the rules in check. You can have parties. I'll be keeping these rules in play.
Now, in your estimation, so far, what is the greatest Flesh and Blood set of all time?
So I actually just recently did a tier list on my channel, and I think I didn't have a set that topped Welcome to Wraith, which I think proved to be a little controversial. But as far as just like establishing the core identity of the game, I don't think you can do better than Welcome to Wraith, where the game plans are super deep and fun. The cards themselves are just iconic at this point between Final Spring Tunic and just like the equipment in that set, Mask Momentum, Enlightened Strike, Pummel, Razor Reflex, Snatch, Scar for a Scar, Sink Below. Like if you just like think about like the core iconic like staples that we've been playing with for 5 years now, which is insane. Like Welcome to Wraith, I think sets a phenomenal standard while also not being like brokenly overpowered, where a lot of sets or card games can come in and be like, oh, well, we don't really know what power level we need these cards to be at, right? We still have some kind of design things to flesh out, but it's proven over time that Welcome to Wraith maybe had a couple cards here and there that might have been a little too good, like Sink Below or E-Strike, but overall, the holistic power level of the set is just like phenomenally balanced for the game as a whole.
I agree. I mean, I don't know if it's my GOAT set. It is one that I always look back on and like, well, the gameplay was excellent. I like the limited gameplay. You know,
I really love
when we did the Farewell to Wraith like draft events, you know, when it went out of print, that was like so much fun. And, you know, I'm always down to do more, especially if it's alpha. But, you know,
it's also a form. It's a lot better with the 30 card limit. Like if you post or retroactively apply the 30 card limit, I think that really helps heroes like Katsu or Dorinthia, where instead of having to worry about, oh no, is my opponent just going to present a big fat 3-block pile?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And, you know, I think that's actually one of the best changes they've made to limited in
10 out of 10. Love it.
Recent years, which is cool, especially after, because it wasn't in Bright Lights.
No, it was after Heavy Hitters, because I think Heavy Hitters was also a format where I think like at the current rules set, it was like a 5 or 6 out of 10. But if you played it with 30 card deck limits, I think it actually becomes like a 7 or 8 out of 10. Like I think it dramatically gets better, because I remember being in ProQuest for Heavy Hitters and just being like, okay, I am presenting 38 cards. My opponent is like landed their class and forced it and never moved off, and they have 42 cards. I think I'm just dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and there's just nothing I can do about it, just because they have more pieces of cardboard in their deck than I do.
Yeah. That's been a great change. So, speaking of changes, we have a new set coming. We're not really there yet, but today, the day that we are recording, and 2 days before you're listening to this, we did see some cards from High Seas. I keep wanting to say Heavy Seas, but it is High Seas. And I mean, listen, we knew Pirates were coming. We didn't know in what form. We knew that likely Ranger was going to be in this set. There was a lot of speculation on Mech. There was speculation on Brute. There was speculation, are we finally getting Necromancer? Well, all of those were true except for Brute. Sorry, Brutes. We got 3 new heroes. We saw them. And we can see, you know, essentially all of their card text.
Yeah.
And we have, first, I want to talk about, let's go in the opposite order that I listed them initially. Puffin Hightail, the new mechanologist, which is a pirate mechanologist hero, which means, at least from what we can tell, that pirate is the talent of this set. How do you feel about that? Or was it, did you think that's a wise choice, or do you look at it like, oh, this is more like royal in a way?
No, I think I had a strong suspicion that pirate would wind up being a talent, just because establishing a new class in a set like High Seas, I think we've seen that be pretty problematic, like just establishing a brand new class individually. So having Necromancer and Pirate be 2 new classes at the same time, I felt would really put them both behind the 8 ball, because when they do introduce a new class like they're doing with Necromancer, I think we've already even seen this, or it's implied on some of the cards, where there's going to be a lot of split cards in the format that are weighted more towards Necromancer to kind of build up their card pool faster, which is, I think, a really smart way to do it.
Yeah, it should be interesting. When's the last time we got a new class? Was it, I mean, I guess it was Dynasty, but that wasn't really a limited class. And then it was Outsiders, really felt like the first real introduction of Assassin. Although we did get Assassin cards in. Yeah.
That's Gravy Bone, so we'll get to him in a minute. But going back to the mechanologist, what's going to be really interesting is seeing how the very greedy base mechanologist cards play with talents, where let's say you're playing 0 to 60 or something like that, but you have pirate class or just pirate talent cards that aren't mechanologist in your deck. Like, you obviously can't play a boost game plan consistently with that. You either have to be all pirate mechanologist or mechanologist. So it'll be really interesting to see how that mechanic kind of like shapes out. I think already her hero text has something to do with Crank, so I imagine that's going to be more of the focus, and maybe some cards in the Max Armory deck will also kind of help supplement the cranking and banking game plan. So we'll see. It seems like they're trying to pivot mechanologist out of just boost all the time. So.
which is I'm excited for. Now the hero text here for Puffin Hightail is action symbol. We don't necessarily know what it does yet. We could probably estimate in a way. We don't know what that will entail yet technically, but it says destroy a gold you control. And also, spoiler, everything cares about gold. They're all pirates. Destroy a gold you control, create a golden cog token. And then the other line of text here is the second time you crank each turn, I'm assuming draw a card. Because we can't really see it would have to be. Every second time you crank each turn, discard a card. This is the worst thing ever. But we don't know what a golden cog token is, but I'm assuming it cranks.
Yeah, probably.
So definitely kind of like a pretty high. I mean, they're all going to be highly synergistic, but to me, off the bat here, I look at Puffin and I'm like, okay, she's going to want to really just get a lot of value, right? Like out of these items, these golden cogs, whatever they do, going to have to create some gold too.
Yeah, it'll probably be a cog that counts for like both a gold token and a mechanologist item. So like you can kind of like 2-for-1 it.
Yeah, and I guess it can crank in a way, which is cool. And what do you think the symbol means? I mean, I think people have already kind of assumed it's tap, but it could also be interpreted in other ways as well.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it was tap, just because that would get a little clunky, because a lot of people are like, okay, activate my hero ability for chain or something like that, or use my piece of equipment. And they've already been like pseudo tapping their cards as a way of representing things already in the game. So having a core defined mechanic that then also functionally tap something could be weird, because then it could be like, okay, you actually can't tap that hero because it now represents the pirate mechanic. So we'll see. Maybe they did it. Maybe we'll just have to adjust our tournament play from there. But that's just a consideration that popped out of my mind about tap. I think it's going to have something to do with the graveyard, probably. Okay. Just because I can see it being where like you have to get rid of like a pirate card in your graveyard, or have to generate some kind of, or it can have something to do with gold itself as well. Like it's specifically you need like a gold resource or something like that. Or once again, like there was chi in those resources, maybe there's going to be like special high tide resources. So we'll see.
Yeah, it should be interesting. The only other thing that I saw so far could be kind of like sinking in a way. Obviously, we're in the high seas, so maybe you sink something from hand or something like that. And because there's also some cards, and we won't talk about those, but they did show some Necromancer cards that mentioned doing that symbol to a ally you control. So put it on the bottom. I don't know. We will see, but. Yeah, Puffin Hightails seems cool. I'm kind of excited because Bright Lights, was Bright Lights, I think, and it was a weird set. I do think all three heroes were very thematic and have kind of captured the hearts of a lot of players. But Puffin Hightail has, I think, probably a good chance to be like really unique and really different. And you kind of nailed it. Like if you're playing just straight up pirate cards, you can't really boost, right? So let's just crank and bank. Now, Marlon.
What do you think the human's name on the card is, though? So we know the bird. What do you think the human's called?
That's a good question. Now, well, actually, what I like to think is actually that's both the names. It's Puffin and Hightail. So
yeah, probably.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Puffin, we're assuming Puffin is the parrot, and the human character it could be Hightail or somebody else. We don't know. Now, moving on to Pirate Ranger. Yes, we didn't get Riptide, folks. It's not sad. Just happy it happened. I don't know. I'm trying to cope a little bit. Marlon, Treasure Hunter, has action, new symbol, destroy a gold token you control, create a goldfin harpoon in your hand, go again. Whenever you draw a card during your action phase, you may put, and probably an arrow from your hand face up into your arsenal. We don't know what the goldfin harpoons do yet, I don't believe. But they could also be gold as well.
Maybe. You never know.
What's your take on Marlin? I mean, it's kind of like, hey, it's doing a Ranger thing. It doesn't feel as, I guess, like you can't really insinuate what the total game plan is going to be here outside of, they're going to be shooting arrows.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about Ranger in particular is that you really need to see what the bows are doing. Mm-hmm. Where like for a mechanologist, you can kind of think like, okay, well, like there's a wide variety of strategy you can use depending on what kind of weapon you want to do, like Hanabi Blaster, you probably won't be boosting that much, or maybe Symbiosis Shot if you're putting a lot of items into play, where like you have more access to different strategies based on the weapon, but like the bows really dictate so much about the Ranger's gameplay, where, you know, it's going to be really hard to beat like Dreadbore's just raw value or getting turnover turn, being able to like draw that extra card is really, really good. So I really don't know a lot about what that power level that hero is going to be without seeing the bow, because once again, Rangers will also be very vulnerable to fatigue and limited without having a real weapon. So we'll see.
Yeah, it looks like we're probably going to get a kind of subtype or something that, you know, these Rangers care about, harpoon arrows, right? You know, arrows that have harpoon in the name. You know, we'll probably get whatever this probably ephemeral or just token arrow in the Goldfin harpoon, but also probably some other harpoons, you know, and I wouldn't be surprised if we just see, I mean, like it most likely will be a bow that just cares about harpoon arrows or something like that, based on what she's shooting in the picture.
That's kind of probably, I don't know. Harpoons, you don't really fire harpoons from a bow.
Yeah. Well, you know, listen, you know, you can make anything a bow in Flesh and Blood.
But not a gun. You can't make anything.
Not a gun. So, you know, it does have to fire from something. So she has like the kind of like thing like that you would imagine a battering bolt to be fired from, right?
Sure.
Because I can't really imagine battering bolt being fired from like a regular, like I play Dreadbore with battering bolt, right? I can't really imagine that, but this feels almost more apt. So Marlin's very interesting to me. There's a lot of questions there. There's a lot of questions 100%. All three, but very cool, happy. Obviously, Pirate Ranger made a lot of sense, and you know, she gets to play Trench. I don't know if it'll be right, which is kind of like sad, but it'll be kind of cool anyway. Let's talk about the number one, the big
Gravy
cheese,
Bones.
Gravy Bones, Shipwrecked Looter. This is our first Necromancer. It's a pirate Necromancer hero. All of these have 4 intellect. We don't know all the health, but we do know Gravy Bones has 40 health. And his ability is instant, 1 pirate resource, destroy a gold you control, draw a card, then discard a card. Love it already. If a blue card has been put into your graveyard this turn, you may play cards with Watery Grave from your graveyard. That sounds like a Necromancer to me, if I've ever heard it.
Yeah. Being that he's a Necromancer and he's going to have allies, it's always going to be interesting to see how they balanced those extra value pieces sticking around turn over turn. So it's something that's been really, really hard to balance and get right in Flesh and Blood's history. So that's, I really want to see what the minions do. Like what's the mechanic for getting rid of them? Like, do you have to attack them directly? Because if so, that's a huge cost. And like already, I can see like a Ranger really struggling to clear the allies, like we saw in Jeromai's existence. Like Azalea really couldn't ever handle that matchup because having to dedicate a whole attack to clear an ally is something that we've seen be a huge cost over the course of a game. But a hero like Lexi, who is able to generate a bunch of action points and go a lot wider, or like Katsu or the ninjas, being able to go wide and kind of more efficiently handle allies has been something that's been, you know, easier for them to deal with at that point. So I just really want to know what the clear condition for the allies is.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I can't imagine, like to be honest, if I were to design a Necromancer from top down, like, yeah, I would have already guessed we were getting allies. It makes the most sense. We even saw some cards in the Hunted that kind of talked about allies. The Anaphylactic Shock, was that what it was?
Yeah.
And, you know, because it was obviously, people thought, oh, maybe this is an Ashwing killer. We're going to get the new Dromai. Then it wasn't. So now we have this Necromancer coming here. If I were to guess, I mean, Gravy Bones is a bony guy, right? I think looking at him, you could see that's a skeleton. He's probably going to be creating other skellies, to kind of do his bidding. If I were to say, I think once they attack at the end of the combat chain, they die, right? They're just strong enough to do that. And you can attack them as well if you want. And then we saw cards that, can do the pirate resource to them. We don't know what that is yet. I think it might just be get rid of them or put them to the bottom. But we won't really know until the watery grave stuff starts to kind of get spoiled. And this will also really be funny if this was a fake leak, and we've been talking about.
No, this came from the Taipei site now, so it's pretty legit at this point.
It's pretty legit. Now, how do you feel about this new class entering the game? Do you think it's going to be elegant? Because we don't quite want Arachne Huntsman. We don't quite want what was our first illusionist? Prism. It was pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
So as long as they don't have Spectra, as long as these new Necromiscalis don't have Spectra, I think we'll be okay on that front. But thinking back, I will put my faith in Mr. James White, where during the Osaka speech, he was like, yeah, we have a fall set coming out, or we have a set coming out in January. Don't care about that set. The summer set, though, that set's banging. And it was so funny just to hear him like gloss over the next coming set, because normally they're like, yeah, the next set's the best set. But they very clearly did not have high hopes for the Hunted, which is hilarious considering how successful it's been now.
Yeah.
But if they underestimated Hunted, but like really, really nailed high seeds in their mind, like that, I think that should be like a marker of like hopefully high quality in and of itself. So I have high hopes for high seeds.
Yeah, me too. I mean, and just looking at it, and it's worth noting the initial reaction here is obviously a lot of excitement, but some people just like hate the name Gravy Bones. Where do you fall in that kind of
it's fine
argument?
It's nice to know that the world of Wraith has gravy. That's they're not so different after all. That Bolton can go home and have some gravy and biscuits.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's fun. It's fun. It's bright. It's colorful. The Hunted obviously made sense. Is like Volcor again, and it was very red and dark, but kind of look at these sets that really kind of bring the really fun, fantastical stuff. Also, like oftentimes can be just a hit all around.
And what's great is like from like a pirate perspective, right? You don't like if you're like Blackbeard or something like that, like a name that strikes fear. People will be on guard and ready for that. But if you're like, oh no, there's Gravy Bones, and they're just laughing on the floor, rolling. They're like, I can't believe we're like this is so stupid. Like what? I'm not being afraid of Gravy Bones. It gives you the perfect opportunity to come in and like pirate them away. So maybe he's actually smarter than the average pirate there.
Perhaps. I mean, like it could also be, listen. When Gravy Bones was just like a regular human pirate before he died, right? That was just his name, and he was kind of a pathetic pirate. And then he dies, and then he's like, well, I'm back now, and I'm like better than ever, which is kind of fun. And we're like, wait, Gravy Bones? It's like the scrawny.
Maybe he died in a big pool of gravy, and now he haunts the seas looking for another big pool of gravy once again.
That would sound good. What a way to go. I will say. But needless to say, all very exciting. There'll be more High Seas talk coming down the pipes in the next couple months, but we do need to get through Pro Tour London first. But also we need to ask some listener questions for Roger here. These come from the Buds and the Buds Discord. Free to join. It's in the show notes below. First one comes from Pat Shaw, who, bluntly goes, what the hell happened? I want the tea, goddammit, unless it's already out there and I missed it. This is probably in relation to the Manor podcast.
Yeah, so the heart of Manor was, I would start every episode by saying, welcome to the Manor podcast. I'm joined by my best friend and other co-host, Michael Hamilton. And there were conditions on our relationship that made it clear that the level of our friendship was not holding up to the same standards or things that I wanted. And this is all going to be from my perspective too. I'm sure Michael has his own things that he's going to say, and like issues that he had with me. So at the end of the day, relationships, be it podcast host, wife, family, just a friend, person on the street, whatever, they're hard. And sometimes they just don't work out.
Yeah, that's true. That's life. And, sorry to hear it, obviously, but, I think everybody's probably better off for it, just taking care of themselves. And Roger, that is awesome anyway. So there we go. Josh L. asks, why is Austin the most adorable tiny human on the planet, and when can we expect to see them again at a major event?
Oh, I love bringing Austin to events. So I brought him with me to Chicago for the Living Legend event. I brought him, my wife, and he was just running around having a blast. Mara was always wearing her dragon Frank, so he just loved seeing Mara and Frank. They had a blast together. So if it's normally my rule is if it's within like 2 to 3 hours, I'll drive to it. And then usually if I'm driving to it, I'll be like, hey, Angela, do you want to go on a road trip with me? Sometimes she's like, nah, I'm going to chill at home. You go do your own thing. And sometimes she's like, yeah, let's bring Austin. We can go have a fun trip together. So I leave that ball in her court. And so if there's another tournament within 3 hours of driving distance of Indianapolis, there's a high likelihood of Austin being there.
Very cool. Very cool. I'd love to meet him. Sigma asks, you often speak about Fab's dark side of unexplored cards and strategies. Is Fab just too fast and unforgiving to implement more of these strategies?
Metas can be like that, but not necessarily. I still think back in heavy hitters, I'll die on the hill that Bolton was like a very good pick and one of the top tier heroes in that meta, but people just didn't explore or give him credit. And I think Leviah also fit in that bucket where KO was like the standout brute, but Leviah definitely had a lot of really powerful things going on at that time with her demi hero just having like really being fully explored. And so it really depends on like the context of the format, but people on my testing team will even tell you, like, I go stupidly deep. Like, there is no card I don't look at when I'm building a deck. I will literally just go card by card through every card in existence when I'm building a deck and be like, maybe I want to put Promise of Plenty in this deck. Maybe I want to put this Everfest item in my deck, or, finally. So I think there can be rewards for doing that. I've obviously never strictly broken a deck like that, but I think it was no coincidence that Michael, when he and I were testing together, definitely was able to take some of my crazy off the wall ideas and, run with them to his own successful, brewing attempts. So, maybe one of my teammates on my new team will, take one of my horrendous ideas and turn it into a gem.
I'd love to see it. That's what I like to see. Next question comes from Mara, the Empress herself. Who is Austin's favorite Fab Pro besides his dad? And if it's not me, why is it not me?
It's clearly Mara. Yeah, 100%. He was asking about Mara like for a long time after Chicago. He definitely loved Frank. And what was really cute is Austin had his own little dragon after that. And he just was like, oh, he can go be friends with Frank afterwards. So we'll have to bring his new dragon friend the next time Mara's at a tournament.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Andromeda asked, what's Austin's favorite Fab hero?
So I don't know how appropriate this was of my idea, but it is what it is, where I have a lot of Flesh and Blood cards strewn about everywhere. And in particular, I bought a lot of MST. I had so much MST bulk. And just eventually, I'd be like, here, Data's sorting cards right now. You have this big giant pile of cards to go and play with and have your own fun. So I think he likes Zen the most. He's always like, oh, I like this guy. Like, I think Zen has like been a standout favorite. I know he does not like New, because he got his hands on like a venomous bite and be like, that snake's biting. That hurts. That's a bad snake. And I'm like, yeah, that snake shouldn't bite. That's right, Austin. So
Good intuition. Awesome. And finally, Capolo asks, how do you find the time to keep motivated to both play and create content while being a dad?
So obviously having a wonderful and supportive partner in my wife is critical for that mission, where she is always very understanding. And, when I'm around on weekends or when I'm not traveling or making content or doing any of the million things I do, I'm very involved with Austin. So like I specifically took I had a hybrid job for a while, but now I'm starting another full-time. I'm very lucky to have another full-time remote position that I'm starting soon. And a large portion of that was just like sitting in traffic for like 2 hours a day and being away from home just made me see Austin like significantly less. So when I'm home, it's much easier just like close my laptop at 4:30, go downstairs, start hanging out with Austin, making dinner and like being more involved around the house. So I'm just very lucky to be having another work from home job at the moment. So I think that goes a long way. And just, being really active and involved when I am here so that, when I'm not here, it's not as like hard, I guess, like that their batteries are more recharged, I suppose.
That's important. It's important. You got to make the time and work hard at it, like all things, right? But Roger, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for coming back on. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy talking to you. Can you please plug everything you'd like to plug? I know we talked about the stuff, but tell the folks where to find you.
Yeah, so I still have a Twitter account, but it's pretty inactive at this point. So I'm usually Roger B _ MNR still, unfortunately, on Blue Sky, but that handle is what it is. And I am releasing weekly content on my YouTube channel, Roger That. So whether it be the next unhinged 10-minute ramble or the next in-depth interview, I hope to see you there.
Awesome. Please check it out, everyone. You can continue to find me on Blue Sky at freshbudspod. Check out the Discord. It's free for everybody to join. YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. And Fresh Juice, my other podcast I do with my cousin, talk about indie video games. Check that out. It's also weekly. And finally, Roger, as always, I like to talk about food before I say goodbye. Tell me about some food you're enjoying or you're craving or maybe one you hate. Actually, no. I don't want to know about a food you hate. Only
Sure.
like.
So on the working from home again train, like I said, go downstairs, start cooking dinner every night. So I've been making food again a lot. Tonight, I was actually watching this food channel on YouTube called Adam Ragusia, I think is his name. And he was doing like budget dinners, and he had like this black bean, pepper, onion, just like side dish. So I threw that with some chicken today with some chili lime seasoning on the chicken. So that was really good. And then for dessert, I successfully make chocolate chip cookies. And I say successfully because I tried yesterday, and I have Austin help me in the kitchen where I'll measure things up. He can dump it. It's very cute. But I accidentally put way too much butter in where the recipe called for like 1¼ cups, and I put like 2¼ cups in. So like I just had like I tried baking them. They just turned into pancakes basically. So it was this whole disaster. I got the butter ratios right. And now we made delicious 10 out of 10 chocolate chip cookies. So all's well that ends well.
Is that your favorite cookie, chocolate chip?
No, I prefer making an actual chocolate cookie with peanut butter chips.
Very nice. Very nice. Those sound good. I don't really do the peanut butter thing in the sweet world as much. I like it more in the savory world, but those do sound good. I love cookies. My wife just made pinoli cookies, if anybody knows, like an almond cookie with the pine nuts on it, but she put pistachios inside as well. And they were just like, so good. But thinking about that, I just don't have time to talk to Charmer this week, so I guess everybody's gonna have to stay fresh. And see ya.